Hot Munitions 380 ACP jacket at hollow point. House of Payne ammunition. My prediction, Payne. And this ammunition was sent over to the channel by one of my Patreon supporters, Major Pavers. So thank you for sending that ammunition over to the channel for testing. He wanted to see what I would get in my M&P as a 3.68 inch barrel and my LCP with a 2 3/4 inch barrel. So this stuff is rated at 1,050 feet per second, 220 foot-pounds energy, says right on the box. I don't know what barrel length they use. The bullet style, you know, I'm not a super expert on bullets, but I think that's a Sierra jacketed hollow point, a Sierra Sportsmaster. But very interesting overall ammunition because it's very inexpensive ammunition, but it's reportedly, you know, pretty good ammunition. So we'll see what we get in our little bit longer barrel and our little bit shorter barrel with this ammunition. So I'm going to go through the chronograph, see what kind of velocity and accuracy I get at the same time. Then I'm going to do my 10% clear ballistic gel test. So I'm going to go into plain 10% clear ballistics to see what the best potential of those cartridges are. No denim in the way or anything like that, to see if we can get some hollow point expansion, to see what those hollow points are supposed to look like. Then we'll move on to doing a real world simulation. So I'm going to have 4 layers of denim, followed by 3 inches of clear ballistics that represents hitting a pectoral muscle, followed by a 1/4 inch medium density fiberboard that represents hitting ribs or sternum, 16 more inches of clear ballistics, and another 1/4 inch medium density fiberboard at the back to represent hitting back ribs. Clear ballistics is roughly a half representation of the density of flesh. So when you're talking 3 inches and 16 inches in gel, it's more like an 1.5 inches and 8 inches in an actual living target. So what we're really representing here is about a 9.5 inch individual with ribs on the front and the back. So we'll do a plain clear ballistic shot, then a real world simulation shot, and then I will shoot at the steel target to see what kind of practical accuracy and shootability I can get with these 2 particular guns. So let's get started with this test. All right, so we're rated at 1,050 feet per second. So first up, I'm going to use my M&P, the 3.68 inch barrel, M&P Shield EZ. See how close I get to that 1,050 feet per second. I'm about 5 yards from the target. $11.07. 1,088. 11.03, 11.13, 10.98. So it's a very consistent velocity. That's got some power for 380 ACP. So, you know, and the recoil in that pistol is way less than typical 9mm. So being that powerful in this little LCP though, this is gonna have some recoil. I did replace the spring in this, the main spring, with a heavier one recently, so that should help a little bit with the recoil. But let's see what we got in the little LCP here. No read, a little bit too high there. 1,074, and I got a malfunction here. Just didn't want to eject that last round out. Keep going. $1,056, 1,058. Same thing again. It's not wanting to eject that round out, which is not a typical thing for me with this LCP. You know, I've got malfunctions in the past before I replaced the spring, but generally they were feed jams, not failures to extract out. I'll keep going. $1,061. So it's not extracting out, and I think it's just that maybe a little bit too hot. So it's just not wanting to come out of this LCP right. Try to get one more read here. $10.31, same exact thing. Every one of these rounds is not wanting to extract out. But, you know, I'm not really seeing anything. I mean, there's a little bit of a bulge in the back of that, but it's not significant. So, I don't know. So let's hit our ballistics gel block and see how these rounds will do. All right, our shot in the plain clear ballistics, our best potential shot, best potential to get hollow point expansion because there's no denim in the way, potentially clog a hollow point. best potential to get good penetration because there's no rib simulation and a way to slow down its penetration. So let's see what we get with our 3.68 inch barrel. All right, now let's hit it going through our little LCP here. Let's go take a look. All right, so that has a lot of energy dump. I kind of suspected this was going to happen because, you know, there's not a lot of mass to that bullet. Sectional density is pretty low on a 90 grain 9mm size bullet. So, you know, you're moving pretty fast. It's going to pancake out, and that's exactly what it did here. So, our M&P on the bottom, our LCP on top. Now, I will say, a lot of stuff in this LCP doesn't usually expand very well. So to see that matching, pretty much matching the M&P's performance, that's pretty good. And the damage in there is pretty good. Now, the penetration is pretty low. And where I'm going to show where these went to, the parallax of this camera's off. It'll make it look like it's like a couple inches or maybe an inch and a half more than where I'm putting my finger. But from a straight on view, we are right at about 8.5 inches with our M&P, and with our LCP we're about at 8 3/4 inches. So what that's going to tell you is, you know, that's roughly 4 inches into an actual, you know, living creature, which is enough penetration with a front on shot, but is definitely not with a side shot. But it energy dumped really good. So what that tells you, if you made a front on shot, it's probably going to be very, very effective. If you made a side shot, it would not be particularly effective. But real world simulation here, that should lower that expansion threshold, and that will more closely represent a real world situation. And that should bring that expansion threshold down a little bit, and we should get better performance. So let's try this with our real world simulation now. All right, our real world simulation, 4 layers of denim followed by 3 inches of clear ballistics that represents hitting a pectoral muscle, followed by a 1/4 inch medium density fiberboard that represents hitting ribs or sternum, 16 more inches of clear ballistics, and then another 1/4 inch MDF at the back to represent hitting back ribs. So let's see how this stuff does in our real world simulation through our 3.68 inch M&P here. All right. Now let's try that from our little LCP here. Another one of those failures to extract. Let's go take a look. All right, we'll have to take one more shot because for some reason that left the block. So I'm gonna try to go low here. LCP, shot 2. Let's go take a look. All right, so very interesting performance with that LCP. You know, a lot of people will say, oh, when I get these curved up patterns, it's because I'm aiming upward, and that's not what's happening. I actually lower my knees when I go to shoot these shots that are a little bit lower, specifically so I can keep the muzzle straight and not have to go down and aim up. So I'm bringing my knees down and I'm just aiming straight. And I can see by looking at the bullet in there why that's curving up. It's because one side of the bullet is deformed and the other side is not. And that will cause that type of yawing effect in there. So our energy dump is not that great with this bottom shot with the LCP. It's a little bit better with the first shot with the LCP, which is kind of interesting. And if we look at these two here though, our M&P energy dump is a little bit greater. So we'll take a look at our MDF here. Not really a lot going on with any of these. LCP, then we have our Shield EZ, and then the other LCP. So they're definitely limited on their expansion from that denim. Now from my view here, it does look like the M&P, it did expand pretty good, and it looks like the LCP, it did not. So that's pretty typical. But they didn't over penetrate, and they still have a high amount of energy. So even though the expansion isn't great, the high amount of energy will prevent it from really over penetrating too much. And you can see right here, it causes a ton of damage. So with our M&P shot, we went right to exactly to 12 inches. So it did a lot of damage in there, and it penetrated to adequate depths. So that's kind of a de facto 9x19 millimeter in a way. It did everything we wanted a 380 to do. Now when we look at the LCP, it penetrated better. We went to 15.5 inches, which is good, but it didn't expand very consistently. It's like just part of that bullet expanded. But overall, not bad performance, because typically what you see with ammo, especially in this LCP, is you might get a little bit of expansion in the plain clear ballistics shot, and it might look good, but then when you move on to the real world simulation, you get zero expansion and over penetration. With this, we got a little bit of deformation, enough to prevent it from over penetrating and a ton of damage in there. And with our M&P, we got actually, I would say, perfect performance. So very, very good overall in my opinion. So let's pull these out of block. I'll take a close-up look at them. Then I'll shoot our steel and see what kind of practical accuracy and shootability I can get with these. Alright, so here's a close-up look at these bullets going through plain gel. This is the one from our M&P. This one over here is the one from our LCP. I have them marked wrong, but here's the one from our LCP, and it actually held together quite well, but it pancaked out quite a bit. So, you know, when you lower that sectional density a lot by doing that, you're not going to penetrate very far. So we did not get very good penetration. And the one over here from our M&P, we had basically the same performance, except that it did fragment out quite a bit because it was moving a little bit faster. So we can see in plain gel that about 1100 feet per second is kind of fast for that bullet. It just fragmented to pieces. So both of them are pretty good, though. They just under penetrated. Now the ones going through our real world simulation, this one right here from our M&P, and this one over here from our LCP. So our LCP did not expand out that well. It did expand one side of that bullet pretty well, but then the other side did not, and that's really what caused that issue, going kind of skewed through the gel. Now the one over here with our M&P, definitely a more consistent, better expansion overall. Just pretty good performance from this bullet from our M&P. So I would say that's a really good performance. We have a little bit of extra bullet base there, so that just keeps the sectional density high enough to penetrate quite well. I would say overall, the performance from their M&P is a lot better. And it's funny because the velocity wasn't, I wouldn't say significantly greater here, but we could see, and I like this because we could see exactly where that cutoff range is, because if we're hitting a low to mid 1000s, this is kind of what we're getting. If we're hitting about 1100, perfect, pretty much. So overall, I'm going to say this is a great load for a pistol that has a long enough barrel to handle it. You know, like my M&P, or they have a lot of other like Bursas and Walthers and stuff like that. There's a lot of 380s that this would do really well in. But when we're talking our pocket pistols, you know, this isn't bad for what a pocket pistol has to work with. There's a lot of ammo that just doesn't even do this out of a little LCP or similar pistol. So for what it is, that's not a bad choice, but for the amount of recoil, I think you could do as well or better for your terminal ballistics with like a critical defense or something like that, because that tends to do pretty well in the LCP. But for here, you know, you just put that firearm weight up just a little bit, and that recoil is pretty much gone, and you perfect your terminal ballistics. So pretty good here. So that's a close-up look at those bullets. All right, 14 yards from the target, so I'm just gonna get a front sight picture and then pop these off as fast as I think I can hit the target and just kind of see how they feel for me in overall shootability. So through our Shield EZ here, let's see how these will do from 14 yards. All right, so very easy to shoot, much easier to shoot than a 9x19 millimeter for sure. So LCP here, I got the extended magazine to help me out here. I don't think it's gonna prevent any malfunctions or anything, but we'll see how it feels for me. Same thing, failure to extract. I did clean this last night, so it's not dirty or anything. Keep going. All right, once it gets running, it shoots pretty good overall. So let me back it up and see how they shoot from some more distance. All right, 40 yards from the target, our Dick and drill distance. So I'm gonna do some slow fire and see how these will do from this distance. So M&P Shield EZ, let's see what this does. All right, shoots pretty good from that distance. You know, I'm kind of going right and left with that windage there, but that's just me. Now, little LCP here. Let's see how this does. Looks like I pulled it to the right. And I'm continuing to get those fails to extract issues. Oh. I'm not really sure where they're going. I'm aiming center, and I'm feeling confident on those shots that I should be hitting, so I'm not sure where they're going. I think they're going to the right every time, so let me aim a little bit to the left. Huh. They're pretty bad with that. So let me back it up just for fun and see how these will do from 75 yards. All right, 75 yards from the target, really just for fun at this point, especially with this. So I only put 3 rounds in this little LCP just for fun, just to see if I can hit. And then I have a full mag of this, and I think I could probably hit with that. So just for fun, let's see what I can do with this little LCP here. 75 yards. Now I hit. A little bit to the left and high. To the right and high, I should say. I have dyslexia, so sometimes that comes out like that. A little bit to the right and high, so keep going. Yeah, I don't know where that went. So we'll try the M&P here. See how this thing does. All right, so not bad overall here. So I'd say this is pretty accurate. I'm usually not very good from this distance with this pistol, looking back on it. So interesting ammunition here. So I'm going to get the elephant in the room out of the way, because there's a lot of people that look at some of my old footage and they think they know everything about my little LCP here, and it's a Jam-O-Matic. That's true, and it's also not true. It was for a while, and then I replaced the spring with a heavier spring, because that's one of the things that, you know, is known in the firearms world, that you really need to replace the springs unless if you're going to shoot jacket hollow point ammunition. And since I did that, I've shot lots of rounds of ammo through this LCP, and I think maybe I've got one malfunction out of several hundred. So this thing is on its game. It's running great. So to go from that to I'm getting like 12 malfunctions and maybe 30 rounds of ammo, yeah, that tells you that there's nothing wrong with the ammo. It tells you that that ammo is a little bit too hot for this particular pistol. You guys got to remember, I am not a pistol handgun tester. I am an ammo tester. So whatever malfunction happens in a gun that, you know, there's a common sense reason for that. You can't look at it and be like, well, your testing's invalid. No, well, I still gave you the terminal ballistics testing, and that's the only reason why we're here. So the fact that my pistol didn't like that, you know, that's not on me, and that's not on Hop Ammo either. It's just sometimes those type of things happen. And if you're going to be an adult in this type of thing, you got to understand that. I just get tired of so many people not understanding that. Sometimes some ammo doesn't work in some guns, and if all you shoot is FMJ at the range because you got your pistol last week, you can't look at this and be like, you're doing everything wrong, bro. Now looking at this, this did really well in this. Even though the power was really, really high and we're kind of rivaling low-end 9x19 millimeter ammo, the recoil on this was still a 380. It felt like almost no recoil, pretty similar like shooting a 22. So I would say that very high-powered ammo out of this pistol is a perfect combination. You know, you can get a 380, you can get a long enough barrel, and you can get really good power. And I would say overall our terminal ballistics was really good. Now I'm not going to look at the plain clear ballistics shot and be like, you know, underpenetrated. The reason why I've been doing just plain clear ballistics is because there's a lot of other people that test ammo, and I get a lot of people coming to my channel that come from watching them where they only shoot plain clear ballistics, and then they'll be like, what's going on? Why didn't you get expansion? And it's like, don't you see I'm using denim? And so I like to include that. And what I see with that is I'm not going to rely on that for my opinion on this ammo. I'm going to rely on going through fabric, going through something hard that simulates bone. And looking at that, it looked like it did pretty good in this. And honestly, if you got a pistol that, you know, has a 2 3/4 inch barrel, that's maybe a different company, and it runs this stuff, it's going to do decent in that as well. So I would say overall, you know, this isn't magic. It isn't like the greatest thing in 380, but it's very cheap ammo, and you get a lot of power for that ammo. So overall, I would say it's not bad. Not bad. So that's what you get today, and thank you again to Major Paver for sending this ammo over to the channel for testing. So that's what you get. So as always, comment, share, and like, and thanks for watching.